So, imagine for a second that you're living in a small coastal town back in the early 1900s.
Okay.
And when I say coastal, I don't mean, a vacation spot with a nice paved highway leading right up to it.
Right, you're talking isolated.
Isolated, exactly. The ocean isn't just scenery out your window. It is literally the only road in or out.
It's a level of isolation that is, frankly, really hard for us to grasp today in our hyper-connected world. I mean, if
Yeah.
you wanted mail, if you needed flour to bake bread, or if you needed a doctor because your child was sick.
You weren't looking at a driveway.
No, you weren't looking at a train station either. You were looking out at the horizon, just scanning for a specific column of smoke.
Waiting for one specific ship.
Exactly.
And that brings us right into the subject of today's deep dive. We were talking about the legendary SS Tarpon. This wasn't just a boat. The sources describe it as the iron heartbeat of the entire Florida Gulf Coast for over 3 decades.
It really was. And just to orient everyone, this is officially Chapter 6 of our Stories of St. Andrews series.
Right. And for you regular listeners, we need to do a little previously on here because this connects directly back to Chapter 4.
Yeah, you really can't understand the Tarpon without understanding what came before it.
Exactly. So if you recall Chapter 4, we talked about Captain Lambert Ware.
Mm-hmm.
He was that visionary who sailed down on that tiny 20-foot sloop and realized he needed to build infrastructure before he could effectively build a town.
Right, he built the sawmill, the mercantile, and most importantly, Ware's Wharf.
That deep water wharf was the absolute key.
Precisely. And here's the mental model I really want you to use for this. Lambert Ware built the hardware, right? He built the destination, the socket, but the tarpon.
The tarpon was the electricity.
Exactly. Ware built the infrastructure, but the tarpon was the vehicle that actually made that infrastructure come alive. So today, our mission is to explore how this single iron-hulled ship became the absolute center of gravity for the community and how its tragic loss marked the end of an entire era.
So let's unpack this vessel first. Because when I hear steamer from the late 1800s, I'm picturing something kind of rickety, maybe wood-hulled, prone to rotting or leaking.
Oh, sure.
But the specs here describe this thing as an absolute tank.
Yeah, it was incredibly robust, which is exactly why it lasted as long as it did. It was built back in 1887 up in Wilmington, Delaware. And interestingly enough, it wasn't originally named the Tarpon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was christened the Naugatuck.
Naugatuck. I mean, that doesn't quite have the same ring to it. Sounds a bit clunky.
No, it really doesn't. But the engineering was super impressive for the time. It had an iron hull, which was crucial. In these warm Gulf waters, wooden hulls were constantly susceptible to teredo worms.
Shipworms.
Right, shipworms that would literally eat through the bottom of a boat. Iron solved that problem completely.
Wow.
It was originally about 130 feet long with a 26-foot beam. But the real secret sauce here was the propulsion. It was a twin-screw steamer.
Okay, let's pause on twin screw for a second. I assume that just means 2 propellers, but why does that matter enough to be a headline feature for a boat like this?
It's all about maneuverability and redundancy. Most ships back then just had a single propeller.
Okay.
If you wanted to turn a single screw ship, you needed forward momentum and water flowing over the rudder. It's kind of like driving a car. You can't turn the car if the wheels aren't rolling.
Right, that makes sense.
But with twin screws, meaning 2 propellers driven by 2 separate compound steam engines, you could run one engine forward and the other in reverse.
Oh, so you could pivot.
Exactly. You could practically spin the ship in its own length.
That's amazing.
For the Gulf Coast, this was vital. We're talking about shifting sandbars, narrow channels, tricky inlets like the pass at St. Andrews. Having that level of control was a total game changer. It was built specifically for reliability in tricky waters.
But it didn't stay the Naugatuck forever.
Yeah.
It underwent a pretty massive surgery.
It did. In 1891, the railroad magnate Henry B. Plant acquired it. And if you know anything about Henry Plant, you know he didn't do things halfway.
Definitely not.
He needed more capacity for his shipping line, so he actually cut the ship in half.
Wait, physically cut the iron hull in 2?
Physically separated the bow from the stern and built a brand new section right in the middle.
Are you kidding me?
He lengthened the hull by about 30 feet.
That sounds like a structural nightmare waiting to happen. You take a perfectly good iron ship, cut it in 2, and just weld a new middle section in.
It sounds wild, but it was actually a fairly common practice for steel and iron ships, provided you had the shipyard capability. It ended up being around 160 feet long total.
Wow.
He renamed it the Tarpon,
Yeah.
and that is the configuration that became legendary. And to your point about structural integrity, This ship survived groundings, it survived fires, and it survived massive hurricanes.
Just a beast.
It earned a reputation for being essentially indestructible.
Which makes the ending of this story even more tragic, but we will get there.
Yeah.
I want to shift focus to the human element for a second, because a machine is only as reliable as the operator. And you cannot talk about the Tarpon without talking about Captain Willis Greenborough.
The two are practically synonymous. You rarely saw one without the other. Captain Barrow took command around 1902 or 1903 under the Pensacola, St. Andrews, and Gulf Steamship Company.
Okay.
And just to give you a sense of his tenure, by 1933, he had completed over 1,500 voyages.
1,500 voyages. That is a staggering amount of repetition. That's doing the same route back and forth for 30 years.
It is. And there is this quote of his that shows up in the historical record, and I think it perfectly encapsulates his attitude.
Let's hear it.
He was famous for sticking to the schedule no matter what the conditions were. He used to say, God makes the weather and I make the trip.
God makes the weather and I make the trip. That is confidence bordering on arrogance right there.
It is, but it was confidence backed by performance. In December 1922, the community actually threw a huge celebration for his 1,000th voyage into St. Andrew Bay.
A whole celebration.
Yeah, and the statistic they cited was mind-blowing. In 20 years of service, he had missed only one trip due to weather.
One trip in 20 years.
Just one.
I mean, think about the pressure that creates. If you're the town, you just stop checking the weather report and you only check the calendar.
Yeah.
If it's Tuesday, the Tarpon is here.
Precisely. And that reliability created a deep dependency. This wasn't just a nice-to-have amenity. This was their lifeline. If the Tarpon didn't show up, you didn't get your supplies. It functioned almost like a utility, like power or water. You just expected it to flow.
Let's dive deeper into that lifeline aspect. We mentioned the isolation in the intro.
Yeah.
What exactly was this ship doing on a week-to-week basis? What did the manifest look like?
It ran a weekly loop: Mobile, Pensacola, St. Andrew Bay, Apalachicola, and Carabel. And you have to remember, this is before paved highways.
Right.
The railroads were there, but they were incomplete and not always reliable for local freight. The Tarpon was the heavy lifter.
So what's in the hold?
Everything you couldn't make yourself. We're talking flour, barrels of kerosene oil, heavy machinery, building supplies, food staples. I mean, if you were building a house in St. Andrews in 1910, the nails and the lumber probably came off the Tarpon.
And it went both ways. It wasn't just bringing stuff in.
Absolutely. This was how the local economy survived. Fishermen shipped their barrels of fish to the bigger markets in Mobile. Merchants shipped their goods. It was the commercial artery, but it was also the social artery.
The sources mentioned that the arrival of the ship was basically the event of the week.
Oh, it was a massive spectacle. And this ties right back to our socket and plug analogy with Where's Wharf from Chapter 4.
Right.
The Tarpon didn't just pull up to any old beach. It docked at that specific deep-water wharf that Lambert Ware had built.
So Ware set the stage, and the Tarpon was the main character.
Exactly. When that whistle blew, the whole town stopped. People would gather at Ware's Wharf not just to get their freight, but to get the news. Who's coming to town? What's happening in Mobile? It carried the mail, it carried the sick to doctors in larger cities, and it brought families together.
It really connected them.
One local history actually described the Tarpon as no mere boat, but an entity that was alive with the people and events of the coast.
It's interesting to think about that transition. We are so used to on-demand everything right now.
Oh, yeah.
But back then, your life had a rhythm that was dictated by the steam engine of this one ship. It really highlights how the town was oriented.
That's a great point. The town was oriented toward the water. For decades, the front door of St. Andrews was the bay. You looked to the water for your livelihood and your news. The road behind you, if there even was one, was just the back door.
Wow, yeah.
The Tarpon reinforced that maritime focus completely.
But as we know, even the most reliable machines don't last forever. And this brings us to the tragedy. September 1st, 1937.
September 1st, 1937. The day the heartbeat stopped.
Set the scene for us. This was supposed to be a routine run, right?
Completely routine. The ship departed Mobile on August 30, heading east. And it was heavily loaded, which is a crucial detail here.
How heavy?
It was carrying about 200 tons of freight, including heavy barrels of oil and a lot of fresh water. It was riding very, very low in the water.
And the weather forecast?
The forecast called for calm weather. But as any sailor knows, and certainly as anyone who lives on the Gulf Coast knows, the Gulf can change in a heartbeat.
Definitely.
On the night of August 31st, a sudden gale developed.
Now, earlier you mentioned the ship was built in 1887. By 1937, that makes this ship 50 years old.
Almost exactly. It was nearing its golden anniversary.
That is incredibly old for a saltwater working vessel. Was the age a factor here?
It likely played a significant role. Iron hulls are tough, but 50 years of saltwater corrosion takes a heavy toll. Plates get thinner, rivets get loose. In the early hours of September, right in the middle of this gale, it began taking on water.
And once that water starts coming in with a heavy load,
It creates a domino effect. The pumps couldn't keep up with the inflow. The crew was literally fighting for their lives. They actually tried to jettison cargo, throwing those heavy oil barrels overboard to try and correct a list, because the ship was leaning dangerously to one side.
and here's the detail that really stuck with me from the research, and frankly, it shocked me. They couldn't call for help.
No, it was 1937, but the Tarpon had no radio.
That seems crazy to me. 1937. I mean, we had transatlantic radio flights by then. We had commercial radio stations. Why no radio on a passenger ship?
It speaks to that transition period we talked about. It was an old-school steamer operating in a world that was rapidly modernizing, but it hadn't quite caught up yet.
Right.
It was a local coaster, not a transoceanic liner, so regulations were different. The owners likely didn't see the need for the expense on such a familiar coastal route. But yes, it meant they were out there in the dark, in a gale, completely alone.
So no SOS, no distress signal at all.
Nothing.
What happened in the final moments?
The gale force winds just overwhelmed them. The water intake became too great. Captain Barrow gave the order to abandon ship, but the Tarpon sank stern first, very quickly.
And Captain Barrow, we mentioned his quote earlier about making the trip no matter what.
He was 81 years old at this point.
81. He was still commanding the ship at 81.
He was. It was his life. And tragic as it is, he went down with his ship.
Oh, man.
After a lifetime at sea and 1,500 voyages on that specific vessel, he stayed with it. Some accounts say he was washed overboard. Others say he refused to leave the wheelhouse. But either way, he died with the Tarpon.
It feels like a very literal end of an era. The old captain, the old iron ship, going down together because they lacked the modern technology of the radio to save themselves.
It really is. And the human cost was incredibly high. Of the 31 people on board, crew and passengers, 18 died. It was a devastating blow. You have to imagine the shockwave this sent through St. Andrews, Apalachicola, and Carabel.
It wasn't just a shipwreck. It sounds like it was the severing of that artery we talked about.
That's exactly what it was. The Pensacola, St. Andrews, and Gulf Steamship Company decided not to replace the Tarpon.
They just stopped. They didn't buy a newer, faster boat.
They just stopped. And that is why this event is such a historical marker. It wasn't just, hey, we need to get a new boat. It was the end of the maritime era for these towns. The Tarpon sank, and the era of the coastal steamship really sank with it.
So how did they survive?
Well,
If the lifeline is cut, does the town just die?
Well, by 1937, the transition was already starting, even if people didn't want to admit it yet. Trucks, highways, railroads, they were becoming the new lifelines. But they were less reliable at the time and certainly less beloved.
It's a forced evolution.
It was totally forced.
Yeah.
Merchants had to scramble to find trucking companies. And this is where that orientation shift happens. Remember we said the front door was the bay?
Right.
After the Tarpon, the town had to turn around. They had to look toward the road. The bay became the back door. The psychology of the entire region shifted from maritime to terrestrial. The paved highway became the new artery.
I want to bring this into the present day because one of our sources made a really cool connection to the physical landscape we see now.
Yes, and this is what I absolutely love about history. It leaves footprints. We talked about Ware's Wharf in Chapter 4 and how the Tarpon docked there.
Yeah.
Well, if you go to St. Andrews today, that exact spot where the deep water meets the shore is the St. Andrews Marina.
So when you see those fishing boats and the party boats docking there today,
You are standing right where Captain Barrow would have docked the Tarpon.
that is wild.
You are standing on the spot that was the heartbeat of the town for 30 years. The wooden wharf is gone, the steamship is at the bottom of the Gulf, but the utility of that location, the geography that Lambert Ware spotted and the Tarpon utilized, is still the center of activity.
It really makes you look at a marina differently. It's not just a parking lot for boats. It's a historical layer cake.
It really is. And the memory of the Tarpon is still very much alive in St. Andrews. It's remembered as a symbol of that era of trust and routine. There's a nostalgia for a time when you knew exactly when the mail was coming, not because of a notification on your phone, but because you could hear the steam whistle blowing across the water.
It's a powerful story. A single machine, an iron-hulled ship, shaping the destiny of a whole region.
and its loss forcing a painful but necessary step into the modern world. It really shows how fragile those supply chains were and how much rested on the shoulders of one man and one hull.
So here's a question for you listening right now.
Hmm.
Next time you drive past an old dock in your town, or maybe a disused railway station that's been turned into a bike path, stop and think.
Mm.
What heartbeat used to exist there? What specific machine or vehicle used to arrive at that spot and connect your town to the rest of the world?
Because usually when those machines go silent, everything changes. The pattern of life rewrites itself completely.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Now, we have covered the local maritime history. We've seen how St. Andrews was built by Ware in Chapter 4 and sustained by the Tarpon here in Chapter 6. But we can't ignore the rest of the world.
That's right. St. Andrews wasn't existing in a vacuum. While the Tarpon was chugging back and forth, there were massive global events happening that would eventually reshape the entire Florida panhandle in ways Captain Barrow couldn't have even imagined.
And that sets us up perfectly for our next deep dive. In Chapter 7, we are going to zoom out, way out. We are going to look at one of the biggest engineering feats in human history.
We are moving from the local dredging of Ware's Wharf to the global dredging of the Panama Canal.
Exactly. We're going to find out how a canal thousands of miles away completely altered the destiny of St. Andrews and Panama City. It's a huge story, and I cannot wait to get into it.
It ties everything together perfectly. I'm really looking forward to it.
But until then, keep looking for those footprints of history. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
See you next time.